So today, we're going to dive into a really powerful mental model for understanding human connection. It's called the Trinket Soul Framework. And honestly, it's one of those ideas that once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. It's like a new lens for viewing the invisible forces that shape our relationships.
Let's just start with this question. I mean, who hasn't asked themselves this at some point? You know that feeling, right? That powerful, invisible pull that keeps you tied to someone even when your brain is screaming at you to walk away. It feels like a kind of gravity. But what if you could actually measure that gravity?
Well, that's exactly where the Trinket Soul Framework comes in. Think of it less as a theory and more as a new language, a new operating system, really, for decoding all those dynamics we struggle to put into words. It's all about making the invisible visible.
So, first up, we're looking at this as a whole new language for our relationships. This isn't just jargon. These are new tools to see our connections with a clarity we've never really had before.
Okay, section 2, the core unit. At the absolute heart of this entire framework, the fundamental building block of everything is a concept called the trinket. So what in the world is a trinket? Well, the key phrase here is genuine cost. A trinket is any signal of investment that actually costs you something real. We're talking time, energy, vulnerability, effort. Think about it. A one-click happy birthday on Facebook costs you nothing. But taking an hour out of your day to actually call that person and catch up, that call, that's a high-value trinket. And for a trinket to actually count, it needs 3 things. The framework calls them particles. First, there has to be an expenditure, that genuine cost we talked about. Second, there's the signal, which is the message you're trying to send. And third, and this is so crucial, is the register. The other person has to actually receive and acknowledge it. If any one of those is missing, the whole transaction fails. It's like buying a thoughtful gift but then leaving it in your closet. Without the register, it's not a trinket.
Section 3. Now that we understand the currency, the trinket, we can start looking at the 2 very different economies where we spend them.
On one side, you have the real economy. This is where real connection is built. It's based on those costly trinkets, helping a friend move, being vulnerable when it's hard, showing up when it matters. But then you have the shadow economy. And this is the world of zero-cost signals that just mimic connection. It's the likes, the streaks, the automated replies. It looks and feels a little bit like connection, but it's all form and no substance.
And this just brings up such an important question for all of us, right? When you're scrolling, when you're online, where are you operating? Are your interactions happening in the real economy, or are you spending most of your time in the shadow economy? It really forces you to think about where your relational energy is actually going.
Okay, section 4, the physics of a relationship. So we've covered the economics, now we're going to switch gears to physics. And this is where we get right back to that idea of relational gravity that we started with. You see, every single genuine trinket you exchange in that real economy adds to something the framework calls relational mass. It's the accumulated weight, the history of a bond. And to measure it, the framework suggests a unit called a Moniz, or MZ. The more real, costly trinkets you've exchanged over time, the higher the MZ, and the stronger that relationship's gravitational pull is going to be. So a long-term marriage, maybe a friendship you've had since you were a kid, it might have a relational mass of something like 1,200 MZ. This incredible mass creates what's called a gravity well. And this just explains so perfectly why it's so hard to leave those deep connections. You're not just deciding to leave, you are literally trying to achieve escape velocity from a powerful gravitational field that you spent years building. But here's the critical part, the warning, really. What happens when you stop investing? When you stop exchanging trinkets? That huge relational mass doesn't just slowly fade away. No. Without what the framework calls a maintenance protocol, that mass starts to decay, and it decays exponentially. And this chart just shows it so clearly. Look how fast that mass collapses. After just 1 month of no real contact, it's dropped significantly. After 3 months, it's practically gone. This is why a friendship that felt rock solid can feel like it just fell off a cliff after a few months of neglect. It wasn't a slow fade, it was a rapid collapse. All right, section 5, applying the framework. We have the core concepts now, the trinket, the 2 economies, relational mass. But the question is, how far can we take this? Because the implications here, they go way beyond just our personal lives. So the full framework is actually laid out across several volumes. We've really only been talking about volume 1. But look where it goes. Volume 2 asks one of the biggest questions of our time.
Can an AI ever form a real bond? Can it exchange genuine trinkets? Volume 4 applies it to psychology, helping to model the intense relational mass of grief or the decay of trauma. And then Volume 5 just scales it all the way up to society, asking if an entire generation hooked on the shadow economy can actually suffer a civilizational level relational collapse. It's just an incredible toolkit. So let's just recap the big ideas here. Our relationships are like economies, right? With costly trinkets building real value in the real economy, while the shadow economy just gives us a cheap imitation. All that real value builds up into relational mass, creating a gravity well that's hard to escape. But that mass needs constant maintenance, or it collapses fast. At the end of the day, this whole framework just gives us a powerful new language for these invisible forces that run our lives. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If you could have a dashboard for your relationships, using this new language, what's the one metric you would choose to track? Would it be the number of trinkets you're exchanging, the current relational mass of your closest bonds, or maybe the ratio of your time spent in the real versus the shadow economy? It's a pretty fascinating way to think about where your connections really are.